Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How are you? It's good to see you. Just getting started here on YouTube. Hello! How is everyone? It's great to see you today. Welcome to the show. So, the question came up yesterday, and I wanted to talk about this a little bit before I dove in too much about painting, about what constitutes a good place to start painting, and so on and etc. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and I also want to talk about last night's kind of exciting first edition D&D game. I want to dive right into that. So without further ado, let's get going. Last night's AD&D game was a lot of fun, really. So the party had taken an elevator down to the bottommost depth of my Castle Greyhawk map, which is really just Castle Bill. I don't have a lot of insight into what Gary's Castle Greyhawk would have looked like. I mean, I've seen some furtive snaps of maps that, you know, people took with their little flip phone cameras back in the early 2000s at Lake Geneva Gaming Convention. And of course, we have Rob Kuntz's ancillary levels, but we don't have a Castle Greyhawk map. And I don't count the Return to the Castle Greyhawk, Ruins of Castle Greyhawk, or the Castle Greyhawk that was published by TSR after Gary's departure. We just don't. I mean, I know that Teeth of the Barkish Noir was a pocket dimension that you reached from the bottom layer of Castle Greyhawk. But as for the central structure itself, it only exists in notional form and will likely be that way forever. So anything I design for my players is strictly from my mind with some influence by Gary. So the party took an elevator all the way to the 20th level, fought a Thessalahydra, and realized, no, we should probably go back up to some place that's a little bit more our speed. So they took the elevator back up. Last week, when they got off the elevator and stepped into a 20-foot wide, 50-foot long vestibule, they were immediately set on by some hellhounds, which they fought off, taking no casualties and inflicting no casualties. But even the hellhounds are smart enough to understand that, you know, that was a very tough party they were facing. So at the end of last week, after a rather involved fight against the hellhounds, they heard a voice call out, "What's all that noise?" And so prepared themselves for some kind of encounter. Well, this week the encounter was upon them. A band of 19 ogres led by a fire giant came roaming into their chamber, split the party slightly. The paladin was off by herself, attacked by 2 ogres and the fire giant, while the rest of the party dealt with the 19 ogres. And the chamber was broad enough that 4 ogres could attack at a time, so it was definitely not an easy fight for them. Although I will say that the dice were not with me very much last night. I won some initiatives, which was awesome, but at the same time, I was not able to hit the gosh darn fire giant, even being an 11 hit dice monster, was not able to inflict nearly as much damage as I hoped it would, backing up the 2 ogres fighting the paladin. Although she did take her share of damage. The real heroes here, again, just like the previous weeks, were the spellcasters. The illusionist dropped her paralysis spell and froze 2 of the 2 ogres fighting the paladin off on the far end of the room. then hit another ogre with color spray, causing it to be stunned and fall. Then using a wand of cold that was retrieved, or a wand of frost rather, that was retrieved from White Plume Mountain, the party's magic user Atho was able to hit the central chamber with a couple of ice storms, first damaging and then blinding a great many of the ogres. So the party slowly and painfully ground through them. Now they also had the advantage of having an additional 3 warriors with them, because one of the players has a Horn of Valhalla. And she sounded it, and the berserks made good account of themselves. The bard played a song. The cleric, he cast prayer. So they were fairly, what is it the kids say today, buffed. They were buffed. And they were able to carry the day. There's Shelby on Facebook. Yay, and Dora. And, oh yes, so the fire giant was still holding its own, and Dora hopped on her broom of flying, moved just inside range enough to cast a Phantasmal Killer, which tied up the fire giant. Now, if you're not familiar with the illusory spell Phantasmal Killer, it essentially summons the image of a terrible foe that can only be seen by the illusionist and the illusionist target, that will fight them for 4 or 5 rounds. And it fights as a 4-hit dice monster. If it hits, the target dies of fright. The target initially gets a saving throw based on its intelligence, 3 die 6, which the fire giants have low to average intelligence, and I rolled way above average intelligence for it on the save, so it did not. It has to roll its intelligence or under, and it did not. So for the remaining 2 or 3 rounds, it stayed in combat with its unseen foe. Being as it was only 4 levels of creature in terms of fighting ability, it didn't strike the heavily armored fire giant, but the party was more than able to bring it to blows. It turned to flee. The remaining handful of ogres tried to flee, and the party put paid, and that was the end of that. So 19 ogres, 1 fire giant in a small space. I thought it would be more touch and go than it was, but the dice were not with me. The dice were not with me, and that was the end of that. Hello, Cerulean. Message retracted. I wonder what I missed. So yeah, in the overall, it was a lot of fun. The fight took a long time because, again, 19 ogres and 1 fire giant. I think the weakest of the ogres had 25 hit points, and the stronger of them had 32. Yes, I do have a second camera going on my stream. There's a reason for that. That's the second part of the stream. And plus, we started a little later than usual because Tracy Lesh, Dungeons & Dragons pioneer Tracy Lesh, who I am happy to say is not only a member of my game, but a friend of mine. Tracy was, he's been unwell lately, and he stopped by to visit, and we all chit-chatted with him before Swordplay came. Had we started right at 10, I think there would have been more exploration and so on, but the party, A, being literally right in front of the elevator to the second level, or back to the first level, and B, having fought a whole lot of monsters, and C, being out of spells and fairly beaten up, decided to grab all the loot they could, which Knocked something over. Grab all the loot they could, which the giant had 3,025 gold pieces in its bag. The ogres had a total of 925 gold pieces and 13 gems among them. They departed for the outer environs of Castle Greyhawk, where their men-at-arms, remember those? I was telling you how important they are. Their men-at-arms were holding fast in the Daern's instant fortress that belongs to the paladin. So back up to the upper level, and that's where we left off, because it was 1 a.m. Eastern, and I do 10 p.m. to 1 a.m. So that was last night's AD&D game. Loads of fun. We all had a good time, and I think we thoroughly enjoyed ourselves. So with that said, yes, no complaints. Now, as I said when I started off, the question came up yesterday. Someone said, well, I'm not looking to get started painting now, but if I was, what would you recommend as kind of like a bare minimum starting? And I want to talk about that a little bit today. Probably the easiest way to do things, and I think can I get to a metallic here? Let me see. Oh, want that. I have some paints sitting here that I want to show you guys. They're fairly crammed in there. There we go. Okay. So, what constitutes a good starting set of paints if you're going to be painting minis? Let's talk about that today. The first thing, and I know I go on and on about this, but I really want to be absolutely as crystal clear as I can about this. Don't buy Games Workshop paints. GW paints are overpriced, undersupplied, and I don't know about their current jars, but there was a run of about 15 years when their jars basically self-destructed the paints. In the space of a few months, you would lose a bottle of paint, whereas I have paints from Games Workshop from the early 1990s that are still good and viable. If you want their colors, then you can go look up the paint compatibility chart on the Daka web forums and find out exactly, like, oh, well, what about Carroburg Blue? That's a Citadel only color. Yeah, no, that's, you can get shades of blue that are exactly identical to it. So don't buy Citadel colors. Don't buy Citadel modeling supplies. Don't buy their brushes. Don't buy their crazy glue. Don't buy their paint handles. Don't buy their paints. Don't buy their green stuff. Don't buy their tools. Don't buy their X-Acto knives. Don't buy their files. Don't buy their sandpaper. Don't buy anything from them. All right, but let's talk about what you should be buying. You need a set of basic primary colors and a few additions to those. So what I've kind of put together here is a diverse range, because I don't really want to say only buy this company's stuff. I want to show you that you can get these colors from anyone. And then we're going to talk about where you can get these colors. So sort of starting from the lightest all the way down to the darkest, get yourself a good white, just a good pure white, not eggshell, not cream white, not off-white, not ghost white, just white. This is from the Army Painter, and this is their matte white color. Let me make sure that's good and centered on the camera, and it's not. Come on. Yeah, this is just matte white from the Army Painter. Now, a bottle like this, these are the size bottles I'm going to be showing you guys. These bottles shouldn't cost you more than $3 a piece. Don't pay more than $3 a piece. Don't pay $5 or $6 for them, okay? In fact, if you buy a starter set, if you're just like, well, a starter set has more stuff than what Bill's showing and it's got a little how to paint manual, that's all fine. That's all very good. You might get a better deal if you can find a starter set. But if you're going to go hunting and pulling individual bottles of paint, find out where they're $2 or $3, $2.99 to $3.25, possibly even $3.49, but not more than that. So just a simple matte white, that's where you should start. And there's going to be a lot you can and should do with this matte white color. And we'll come back to that in just a second. Next, a nice yellow. This is Reaper 9008 Sun Yellow. Now you might say, well, hey, I can mix enough white in with red and make a yellow. Maybe, but you're going to be using a lot of your white paint and a lot of your red paint just to make a little dab of yellow. So this is, again, this is Reaper 9008 Sun Yellow. And you might be saying, but Bill, you've sung the praises of this triad system. Are you not going to talk about triads? This is just for starters. This is just if you want to get your feet wet. So a nice yellow shade. And next, of course, this is another Reaper color. This is 9014. This is grass green. This is like a medium dark green shade. I'm kind of fond of it. But again, you can get equivalent shades from other companies. Now, reds are kind of tricky. Some reds, like I'm very picky about reds. I need a nice, vibrant red. I see some reds that are too pink. I see some reds that are too, they're like the color of shellfish. For me, the best reds are from Reaper, and I didn't even get the best red out of the set of Reapers. Like they're blood reds, blood red, carnage red, and dried blood, I think. Oh, I love those red shades. For deep, deep, deep reds are just top notch, but that's a little advanced. So this is just this is Reaper 9004 Fire Red. And again, you can get that through most hobby shops, $3. Now obviously, what follows a nice red, but a nice blue. Now this is this is more of an example of blue paint than it is you should go buy this shade. This is Vallejo model color 7943. This is a gray blue. This will go on a little bit chalkier than a good blue. This is Coat d'Arms 114, and this is, let me see. This is Enchanted Blue. This is a better blue in my opinion, and this matches Wizard Blue from Games Workshop from back in the day, except it's in a little jar, and we're going to talk about jars versus droppers and so on. So a yellow, a green, a red, and a nice blue. Now, with that lineup, you should be able to get a pretty good, a pretty good start on your minis as far as colors. But I want to see here, do I have at arm's length? I forgot to bring, and I think it's over on the other table unless I've got it here. Here we go. You also want a nice brown shade because you don't want to have to mix multiple paints together just to get, if you just need a dab of brown, you want a nice brown. This is a bit dark, but again, just as an example, this is Reaper 9029. This is Earth Brown. And you can use this for leather tones, you can use it for hair, you can use it for for you can even darken skin tones with it. So a white, a yellow, a green, a red, a blue, and a brown. Now let's talk a little bit about skin tones, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about metallics. If you're just starting and you only want one shade, start with a slightly tanned shade, because remember, your adventurers, they're in and out of doors, they're sleeping under the stars, they're on long road marches. Unless you're painting up a Prince's Fair, I would go with a shadowed tone for Caucasian skinned adventurers. And I want to make very clear, Caucasian skinned adventurers there. So a really good compromise on this is Rosy Shadow from Reaper. Reaper's my go-to for flesh tones. So unlike the others where I'm saying, yeah, you could get this company's yellow or this company's green, I would definitely go with Reaper flesh tones. Now, even in a fantasy world, people come in all shades, and not just fantasy shades like, oh yeah, they're green skin or they're blue skin or they're violet skin, dark, like glossy black, not African style when we say black, skin colored. But when you're talking about recognizable skin tones, it isn't just, well, for lack of a better term, white people. And I'm not being woke. I'm just saying you do want some diversity. I mean, the Seul and Greyhawk run the gamut from Hispanic, what we would, as far as skin tones, what we would call Hispanic, all the way to black. So if you're playing in Greyhawk and you got a bunch of people who are Seul, Caucasian colors ain't gonna cut it. So what to do then? Well, Reaper rides to the rescue because they have golden skin tones, they have olive skin tones, and they have dark skin tones. So you can paint up a variety of different regions: Asians, African Americans, Caucasians, Northern Europeans, if you want to use the rosy or the pale skin colors, and so on and etc. But just for, if you're just starting with skin tones and you want to work with something that's a little easier to see and shade initially, I would just start with Rosy Shadow. So, the next thing, of course, is metallics. Now, there's a whole school of painting style. And hello, Cam 138, or 1138, I see you there. THX 1138, great science fiction movie. So when you're talking about painting metallics, there are people who paint non-metallic metals. They use gray and white and black and other colors to paint on reflections and specular highlights onto metal surfaces that look like metal colors, but they aren't. Like, they'll use browns for coppers and golds, and gray for, metallic gray, and so on. I've never gotten the knack of it, and more to the point, those look great in photographs. They don't look good on the tabletop when you're moving them around, because those specular highlights, they don't move when you move the miniature. All right? If you're implying that the sun is over here and your mini is here, and you've painted all the specular highlights in the armor from here, it doesn't look right. It looks silly and cartoonish. So, I'm not a fan of non-metallic metals. There are many, 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 many lovely metal shades from a lot of miniature companies. And again, you can go with a middle. This is just a good metallic shade here. This is from Reaper. This is Honed Steel. But I find that Vallejo, I think I've got one sticking up over here, actually. Yeah. This is a Vallejo hammered copper. So if you want to do something that's not like a shining steel color, you can give Vallejo game color of hammered copper. But some kind of metal tone is definitely something you want to have in your quiver. So here we have 2, 4, 6, 8 basic paints at, let's say, $3 a piece, $24. $24, and you've got a good paint, a good starting paint set. Now, you might ask me, well, what about the triad system, Bill? I want to do the triad system. So does that mean I have to buy 3 times as many paints? No, you don't. Because you have a white paint. Now, mixing colors, and I really probably should have this like a palette out, a wet palette out, and show you guys the results. But I think you'll be able to follow me here. If you want to brighten, like let's say you want this green, you want a lighter green. And this is something we all learned in kindergarten, like Cerulean Knight says, my kindergarten education is paying off. It will here too. You go to maybe a mix of 2 to 1 with your white. For every 2 drops of color, 1 drop of white. And you'll brighten it up to the next level. If you want to darken it back, you can add your original color back into it, and maybe a tiny drop of brown or black, which is I meant to have a black paint out here also, but a basic black. Is this? It's Nightshade Purple. That's not black. But yes, add a black to this. Oh, lost my light. So the white balance should hopefully kick on over here. But yeah, if you want to darken the paint, add a little brown or add a little black. Again, at a 2 to 1 mix. And there's your triad. Your base, 50% white, takes you up to the lighter shade. 50% black or brown takes you down to the darker shade. That's all you need to worry about. There is your painting triad. Now, I'm lazy, and I've had lots of time to collect lots of paints. So I've got complete triads of color. I'm not super worried about it. How important are the tools and materials in mini painting? I'm going to answer that in just a minute. So the next thing, and I want to, I really want to emphasize this a lot. Once you've got your mini painted up, you may find that it looks a little full bright. Like if you've ever gone into a computer game and just for a lark, like turned off all the shadows or something, it's like, I know that 2x2 pixel magic ring is somewhere in this chamber. I don't know where it's at. I'll go in the gamma settings, or I'll use a console command, and I'll just turn off all the shadows so everything's full bright. That's how your minis are going to look initially painted, even after you do highlighting and so on. Where you fix that, and this is very important, is with your washes. Washes are ultra-thinned dark paints that you want to literally wash over the surface of the mini, and they will sink down into the crevices. Now, they may pile up. They may pool up. Like, you may have an eye socket that just, like, you do a flesh wash, and the eye socket is just a puddle of color. You can leave it like that because it is going to dry up. The water is going to evaporate, and the pigment is going to sink down. Now, in the case of the eye, odds are you're going to end up with a stained look. It's going to look like the person's got a lot of eye makeup. So you can use a little paper towel, just like the corner of a paper towel, and touch it to it, and it'll suck that wash out. But washes define deep shadows and give your mini depth and they make it pop. They make it look like it's got actual shadows down in folds and curls and so on. And for skin, you need look no further. This is Reaper Flesh Wash. Now, some people swear by the Games Workshop Flesh Wash, which is still available from Code to Arms. I think it's actually called Flesh Wash. But it's an old school product. I find that the Reaper Flesh Wash is pretty good. Some people say it's too pink for their taste. I don't think so. You can mix this with water or not, but if you're talking about flesh wash, I kind of do recommend mixing it with water. Because you don't, like if you've got Maiden Fair and you just want to get here around her hair and perhaps a little, where her lips meet and, cleavage, she's got a nice dress on. You don't want to turn that and make it look like she's covered with dirt, if you put the wash all over her. So thin your washes. And that's something else I want to emphasize too. Thin your paints. Thin your paints. Thin your paints. Thin your paints. Whether you mix two paints or you use just a paint by itself, your paints should be thinned and they should go on. When you run the tip of your brush through your palette, whether you're using a wet palette or the little cup-shaped dry palettes, like just artist palettes, you want your paint to have the consistency of skim milk. And when you put it on your mini, you may think, oh man, this is just running everywhere. It doesn't look right. More coats of thin paint is better than one thick coat. One thick coat destroys detail. It fills in detail and it looks gloppy. So thin your washes, but definitely thin your paints. So there's a flesh wash. Now for the overall, there's two schools of thought. Some people say don't bother with flesh wash. Just go in and black wash the entire mini. It'll look good. I've seen some people do that and their minis pop. I do it and my minis just look dirty. I don't have the talent of black wash. But for equipment, for weapons, for clothes, that sort of thing, yes, I will use a black wash. Now, you've seen me talk about ink shading on my minis before. Sometimes ink shading is just enough. I'm sorry, I've got a loose hair here that's driving me nuts. It keeps brushing my arm. But in either case, there are some great washes here. These two are by Vallejo. One is a black wash and the other is an umber wash. The umber wash, mix that with a little bit of distilled water and wash your whole mini with it, and it will, like particularly if you've got a soldier or somebody who's looking grubby, has been in the field a long time, this is definitely a good color to it. A good wash to use. And then black wash, same thing. It's just an overall shading effect and your mini's going to look so much better for it. And again, these washes, these three washes that I'm showing you are no more expensive than your regular bottles of paint. They're not like super special stuff. So far we've got the 8 bottles of paint, and I would recommend having a separate flesh wash from your other washes, but you don't have to have both umber and black. You can just go with one of the two. So that's 10. So far we're into about $30 here. Another that you can go with, and this goes more into a technique thing that's a little advanced for what we're talking about today, but I will mention it because they are very nice. This is Strong Tone from Army Painter. Army Painter has a very specific method, and you can find their videos here on YouTube. But you can use Strong Tone in lieu of using either umber or black wash. Just be sure that the mini you're going to wash, you want that degree of shading. Because like it says on the tin, it is a strong tone. It's not, It's going to shade the heck out of your mini. So regardless of which of these you get, again, you're looking at about $30 there. Now, the final step, once you've got your mini painted up, everybody's going to be putting their Cheeto and pizza greased up hands on your minis on the table. All right? You know, you got Bob the Fighter here. And the guy playing Bob, well, he's going to want to pick him up and check him out. Like, oh, man, you did such a great job on this guy. Look at that. Look at the sword and everything there. This guy looks so cool. Bob's greasy, sweaty hands have salts on them that will rub the paint right off. Right here, matte varnish. I cannot recommend Reaper's matte sealer right now. I've had too many problems with it, and explaining how to fix cloudy matte sealer is a separate video all into itself. But I've had good success with this Vallejo matte varnish, and this was, can't quite see the price tag on it, $2.59 at Hobby Lobby. Don't buy your stuff at Hobby Lobby, by the way. I'm not. I bought some Vallejo paints there, and I'll talk a little bit about the wares of buying your paints. But yeah, this matte varnish, and if you're worried about it making your shiny metallics look dull, you can get a semi-gloss varnish from Vallejo also. So there you go. That's 3, 6, 9, 11 paints, $33 for a starting set of paint. Now brushes, if you're just starting, get inexpensive fine point synthetic brushes. Don't go spend $7, $8, $9, $10, $12 on ultra fine sable brushes. Just don't do it. Okay, you might paint 4 or 5 minis and be like, screw this, this is not for me. All right? If you buy a package, a whole package that shouldn't cost you more than $4 or $5 of sable brush, of synthetic brushes, that you just like, okay, I'm going to give these to my kids to do paints with, or they're going to sit on a shelf and stare at me guiltily until, you know, I send them off to Goodwill or throw them away. That's fine. If you've spent $7 or $8 a piece on your brushes, it's more of an investment. So just get a nice set of fine point modeling brushes. And don't worry about getting the hyper finest, ultra tiniest brushes initially. Just get a nice set of medium brushes. I've got, let me see here if I can pull some of these out. Now these are used recently, so the points are not as nice as they could be. But again, these are from my erroneous shopping at the previously mentioned outlet. But this entire set of brushes, I think, cost me like $7.99. And yeah, these are just some synthetic brushes. This one's got a kind of a bend in it and so on. And just get yourself a set. Get 2 sets, because you're going to gum them up. You are going to gum them up. I'm not slamming you, but you're going to gum them up. The next thing you should get, and I mentioned this last week, distilled water. If you live in a state, in the southeast or southwest particularly, or the northeast or the Midwest around a major city, your water is going to have a lot of contaminants in it, and that will affect the texture, flow, and color of your paints. Lots of salt, lots of iron, lots of sulfur. All those things are used as paint pigments, and they will discolor your minis. Like I said, when I moved to Florida and I saw where sprinklers were up against buildings, and it was just this big smear of brown, Looked like somebody had painted brown, but it's not. It's the iron content in the water. It's the mineral content in the water, rather. Just staining walls. 99 cents for a 1 gallon jug of distilled water is a worthy investment. Make sure you're painted in a well-lit area. Get yourself a nice lamp or two that you can put on either side, illuminating what you're painting. Or the best light is natural light. If you've got a room that's it's a solarium or it just gets a lot of light all day long and you can sit by the windows, sit there and paint. Now, I have old eyes. I need those. They're hanging on a hook on the other side of the room, but I need those mag eyes. You may not. Let me answer some questions here. Let's see. How important are the tools and materials in painting? Pretty important. You don't have to buy multi-$100 painting gear. In fact, don't. There are guys like, if you go watch Black Magic Craft on YouTube, this guy paints up like, he's done a Dollar Tree challenge where he's like painted up character and monster minis by buying mini like army men or night warriors or whatever on the dollar store toy aisle, and then basing materials in their crafting area, and then crafting paints that he brings home and mixes up and paints, and it looks perfectly acceptable for tabletop. Golden Demon Award winner? No. Absolutely rocking on the tabletop? You betcha. But with that said, that is a talent unto itself. And it's a talent I myself don't really have. So you may want to just go ahead and get a set of paints meant for minis, and then as you move on and become more comfortable with kit bashing and trying things out, then move on to the 99 cents for a 5-ounce bottle of craft paint to use as your brown color that you go with. So just paints wise, and this doesn't touch on other materials that I use, but just paints wise, that is a fine place to start. White, yellow, green, red, blue, brown, flesh tone, metallic, couple of washes, a flesh wash and a dark wash, and a varnish. From there, you can move outward. Now, materials, if you're just starting, I would recommend, and I think that this is just like a thief set that you can get. These are WizKids minis made by Nolzers. And the nice thing about these is, and there's a reason I didn't touch on priming your minis, or I don't show a primer there, but the Nolzers minis that WizKids puts out for Wizards of the Coast, these minis come pre-primed with Vallejo primer. They have a thick layer of Vallejo white primer on them. You don't have to do anything to them except mold line cleanup. And that involves taking an X-Acto knife and going through and finding all the little bits of plastic flash where when these were injected into their molds, they kind of oozed out of the halves of the mold. They've got mold lines on them. You have to clean them up. Otherwise, it'll look weird. Paint and shade will pile up against them, and you'll have this very well-defined, oddly colored line, like down a mini's face, at a weird perpendicular angle on his sword, down their body, what have you. So an X-Acto knife is also something you should have. But these are cheap. This is like $7.99 for 2 of these guys. It's like what mini prices used to be, because you're looking at about $4 a piece for these guys. And everything's covered on them. Flesh colors, metallic colors, browny, earth, leathery colors. You can do brighter colors for scabbards and other bits of equipment. But just get some of these in practice. And remember something, and this is so important, and I tell people this all the time, because I was there a long time ago. I was there not that long ago, rather. I'm sorry, not that long ago. Don't be afraid to screw up, and don't be upset with yourself if you screw up a mini. All right? If you're coming in and you're like, okay, I'm going to put a black dot on that eye, and that's just, guys, I just painted the entire side of his face black. You know, don't just throw it down and leave your paintbrush there to dry and your paint to curdle up in your palette and stomp off. Just laugh about it. See if you can clean it off before it dries. And if not, you know, if it's one of these Nolzur's minis, that primer is fairly baked on. Take it over to the faucet, use a soft toothbrush, and wash it off and start over. Just start over. Okay? Nobody is going to judge you. Nobody is going to come to you and say, well, you tried your hand at mini painting. I can see that's not working out. I guess you suck. It's not going to happen. Certainly not from me. All right? You know, if you want to start painting and you're like, I want to win the crystal brush, I want to win the golden demon, don't listen to me. Go find better resources than Bill Sylvie if that's your goal. But if you want to paint stuff that's good for the tabletop, everything I've said is a fine starting point. Everything I've said is a fine starting point because it's where I started, and I do a pretty okay job of painting minis. Sometimes I get minis. People have gifted me so many sets of minis that I don't even know what to do with. A lot of them, like those hirelings, which I actually intended to paint today but didn't get around to. You know, those hirelings, I wasn't even going to bother with those until I realized, A, I had a complete set, and B, the sculpts were actually okay. But yeah, if you're looking for a place to start and a place to practice, go on to eBay and spend $20 and just buy a shitload of old Raoul Partha minis. Make sure that some of them are painted and repair some of those paint jobs, modify those paint jobs. Strip them and paint them to your liking. That's a lot of the paint sets that people have gifted me, a lot of the mini sets rather, that people have gifted me and donated to me are all like that. They're minis that are half painted or not painted or really painted or whatever. And I've just gone through and said, okay, I'm going to keep all these painted ones because, man, like, I've learned to love the aesthetic of 70s mini paint styles, like when people would use testers, enamels, and so on. So, you know, a lot of them just went right on the shelf. Hey, boom, I have men-at-arms. I have monsters. I have whatever. And some of them, I was like, that's going right in the simple green. I'm just going to strip that off and scrub all the paint off and wash it off and wait for it to dry and prime it and start over again. And some of them are not painted at all, and I can experiment with them and have fun. So that's definitely a good source. But cerulean, your tools and materials, it's going to matter. Imagine you're working on your car. And now, just like I said, Black Magic Craft can go to the dollar store and get dollar store junk and make stuff that looks fantastic for the tabletop. A skilled mechanic could probably go to the dollar store and get a cheap socket set and do some basic maintenance on a car, at least good enough to you know, change the spark plugs or whatever. You or I might go there and pick up a set of tools, screwdrivers, sockets, what have you, that just break. You know, they're drop forged pieces of shit made in China, made in North Korea. that just crumble away when you try and use them. The point I say when I say don't rush out and spend tons of money on brushes is to decide if it's for you and how much effort you want to put into it. If you knock out, if you buy up, say, the paints I've described and 8 or 10 Nolzur's miniatures, and you blitz through those, and you start with one that's kind of meh, but by the top one you're producing something that's just like blowing away anything I can do, and you're like, yeah, I'm digging this a lot, then start looking at resources online. That's when you invest in your expensive as hell sable brushes and your magnifying glass sets and your super expensive paints. And I mean, some mini painters mix their own pigments. They grind their own pigments from chalk and pastels and make their own paints. I mean, they're that advanced. So I hope that answers your question, Cerulean. Cam 1138 says, I think Army Painter has 3 levels of tone. They do. This just came out of their starter set. But I was just including that as you can get Army Painter. But yes, they do make 3 levels of tone. And hey, your tones and your inks, you can thin those out too. I hate those people who can't wash their hands at cerulean before touching my stuff. Yeah, that is one thing I will get, like, don't sit there with marinara sauce dripping down your fingers and ask me for a player's handbook. I'll hand you a paper towel or a washcloth first. I got into a serious altercation, like it created some bad blood because I told people, and this has nothing to do with handling things, just here in the man cave where we played AD&D, like I came out, one Saturday morning after a game, and there was garbage scattered on my floor. Food bags, empty drink bottles, stuff like that, and I wasn't having it. And so the next night, I'm like, don't put garbage on my fucking floor. So same with minis. People, make sure they clean up their hands. You mean I don't need, Cerulean says, you don't mean I need to buy genuine Arabian horsetail brushes. No, you don't need to buy original camel hair brushes, brushes made from the hair of a saint, at least not initially. If you decide you want to go down that route, you certainly can, but you don't have to. Cam says, excellent tip about the distilled water. Yeah, it's cheap. 99 cents. Almost said $99. 99 cents for a jug of distilled water. It's cheaper than a 2-liter bottle of Zephyr, or a liter bottle of Zephyr Hills spring water for drinking. And just as long as you keep the cap on it and don't stick your fingers in there or dip your brushes directly into the jug, it'll keep relatively indefinitely. The bottle that I have been using, I have had for over a year now. So, because I just use a little of it at a time. I just put a little in a cup to clean my brushes on and to use as a water source to drip onto my palette and mix in with my paints. So that is your basics. That is your beginnings, guys. And I feel like that's just an absolutely fine place to start. Now, I was going to have had the higher leagues out and have been painting while I was telling you these, but honestly, I think I probably would have been distracted and my thoughts would have been half completed. So damn it. Sorry. The hair keeps brushing on me and I couldn't grab a hold of it. That is, I felt like it was important enough to answer your question without being completely distracted. It's still obviously a little distracted. But I guess in a little bit we've got left, because I do have stuff I have to do today other than this. Oh, one thing I did want to mention. When keeping your brushes, regardless of whether you've got inexpensive synthetic brushes or you're using natural brushes, but especially if you're using natural brushes, For cleaning your brushes, one of the best things you can get, and it's inexpensive, is right here, Ivory soap. 99.98% pure Ivory soap. And I'll show you guys. You wet the soap, under the faucet. You just run it under the faucet so it's wet. You wet the end of your brush. I'll just use this one. He's kind of gone a little beaker there. I'll show you. You just like that. You get some soap on it, and you just start scrubbing it. And you scrub it, and you paint your palm. You occasionally just paint your palm to see if pigment's still coming off. And it is. You just come and you get some more soap on it, and you scrub it some more. Literally, lather, rinse, repeat. There's no perfumes. There's no dyes in Ivory soap. Once you got it clean, where no more pigment's coming out, even if it looks like that coming out, you can just... And this guy's too beakered for that to help. But you can just lick it and get it back, work it back to a point and let it dry, and it'll stick that way. Now, there's a way to fix brushes, but we're not going to go into that today. We don't have the time or the setup. But if you lose the point on your brush, they get a curl in them, they get wild hairs, they get beakered. There are ways to fix them. So don't think that you're just hosed if you accidentally one of your expensive brushes. I have saved brushes that you would think would have been completely beyond saving. And I mean, these are brushes that I've used to paint Elmer's glue on miniature bases for basing terrain on, just to see if I could do it, and I was able to do it. It involves hot water, conditioner, and a lot of patience. Yes, conditioner. Yes, real conditioner. So now that I've run my mouth in the last, say, 5 or 10 minutes, do you guys have any questions for me? If you do, just put them in the live chat there on YouTube, or ask them of me on Facebook, and I will be more than happy to lend my limited knowledge of mini painting to you and answer just whatever you've got. Any questions at all? And while you guys are formulating, I just wanted to mention, let me see something here. See if I've gotten a response to an email. So, a buddy of mine is considering buying a... I think I may have mentioned this yesterday. He's thinking about buying an original D&D set. And he and I were just talking about it. If he decides to buy it... And when I say OD&D set, I don't mean like my original collector's edition, which is very nice, by the way. Or even my loose OD&D books. I'm talking about he wants to invest in a wood grain, one of only 1,500 ever made, original Dungeons & Dragons set. If that comes to pass, and if he does that, then there will be an unboxing. I won't handle it. I will run the camera. I will narrate it. It will belong to him. An item like that could potentially run north of 5 figures, I would not want to touch. He will do the cotton glove treatment while I talk about it and zoom in and work the camera. So, may not happen tomorrow, may not happen next week, but there will be a 1974 wood green original D&D set unboxing, I can almost guarantee, at some point in the future, perhaps later this summer. Let's see, I always have some busted up brushes for glue. Yes, that brushes are good until they are literally just the handle and the ferrule and nothing else. And even then, I'm sure you could find some small tool use for them or something. Have I ever used Tamiya paint? No, but I've heard good things about them. I like them as they seem to have the right thinness. Well, rare is the paint that I don't feel needs to be thinned with either distilled water or with flow improver, which is kind of a level 2 thing using flow improver. But Tamiya paint has some nice shades. Some of them aren't as vibrant or as bright as some of the Reaper or Vallejo game color or coat d'arms or even Army Painter paints. Does a Resin 3D printed Resin Mini need any special treatment for painting? No, it doesn't. Not really. I mean, once you've cured it properly and all, and cleaned it up, washed off any potential residue from the curing process, absolutely. No, you can prime it and paint it. And the same goes for FDM printed items. Cam says, wow, very cool. I have a white box that a friend gave you an OCE white box. That is amazing, and that is an amazing friend. That's really cool. Yes, north of 5 figures, $10,000. The one that I linked him last night, let me see if I can find it. Let me see if I can find this listing origin. Oh, stop bothering me. Sign in. Original Dungeons and Dragons wood grain. Oh, here's one for $5,000. But it has writing on the front. I'll share this in the chats. Yeah, so if you got $5,000 just knocking around, you can you can just go right over to eBay and pick one up. So someone has written. So there's the sticker. It says Dungeons and Dragons. It's it's got the info, but under that they have written, and then have an arrow pointing to the Dungeons and Dragons title. Men and Magic, Monsters and Treasure, Underworld and Wilderness, and then Chainmail scratched through. I guess they lost their Chainmail set. Greyhawk, Blackmoor, Eldritch Wizardry, Gods, Demigods, and Heroes, Swords and Spells. The box is otherwise in actually okay shape. Very interesting, but stupid. No. Oh, and underneath that, it's further defaced. They did a circle around the 3-volume set, crossed through 3-volume set, wrote Chainmail, crossed through Chainmail, and then have plus Greyhawk underlined under that. So the cover is pretty janked up. If I had this kind of money to spend, I would not be okay with that level of defacement in it. Again, if I had that kind of money to spend. This is a 4th printing from November of 1975. Now, I'm not sure. That's interesting. A wood grain set from November of 1975. That may not be. Let's look in the description. Original wood grain box set of Dungeons and Dragons. This is identified as a 3rd plus. Per the information on the Okium site, the wood grain box has the horizontal grain and a larger decal. The books are 4th printings. This isn't a one-off. I've read that these sets have been found before. Apparently, Gary and company weren't too particular when boxing up their product. Various combinations of printings sometimes got assembled with product on hand. So this clearly would have been one of the later 3rd print runs, the original 3rd print box, along with the newly and freshly printed 4th print books. The set is complete, all 3 booklets and reference sheets. Yeah, that's not really my cuppa. I don't know that I would. If I had $4,500 to spend on just my hobby, I don't know that I'd pick that one up. But you can get a pinup wood elf miniature. Apparently that's what eBay thought I was also referring to. Here's a non-OCE white box for $11.99.95. Another non-OCE white. Oh no, that's an OCE. That's $850. And then the rest is a bunch of crap that is not the 1974. You know what? Let me see that. Original Dungeons and Dragons. See what comes up there. There's one for $900. 2 of the booklets and the reference sheets for $175. $625 for the 3 booklets by themselves. The reference sheets for $69. Nice. All the books and the supplements for starting bid $17.50. Buy it now of $2,500. 6th printing OCE. What the hell is with this description? Listen to this. OCE D&D 6th printing, original white box volumes. That's fine. Gygax. That's fine. 10,000 plus pages extra. What are you sending me, a phone book to use for NPC names with that? Oh my God. 1974 Topps Football. D.D. Lewis, number 303. RC, Dallas Cowboys. That's not who we meant, sir. And then a bunch of car parts that apparently have 1974 in their name. So let me try one more thing. D 1974. Did you mean D&D 1974? A copy of Supplement 2 Blackmore for $150. 3 monochrome modules and swords and spells for $197. Yeah, a lot of stuff out there. Let's see. That reprint from WotC of the 7 volumes is nice. Yes, I have one of those. It's interesting. It's not perfect. They had some underlying things in it, but it's still cool. It is damn cool for a collection, and it's very usable to play. Or you can buy the OD&D books. Keep that on a shelf. Buy the OD&D books on RPG Now or something. Who let their toddler loose on that box? I try to keep even my current games in pristine collection while playing them, of course. Yeah. Are original D&D books that valuable to people? Okay, so Cerulean. This is my take on it. And I mentioned this yesterday, but you or I, or anyone listening to the live stream, anyone can go out and get OD&D. Legitimately or non-legitimately. It's not like in the early 1990s where if you wanted OD&D, the closest thing you could do if you couldn't get a hand on a white box set for a couple $100 back then. Although I only paid $80 for mine in 2005. I paid $80 for my OCE in 2004 or 2005. If you're if you're willing, whether you want to pay for it or not, you can get OD&D. There's no secret sauce in the wood grain sex except the words halfling and Balrog. I'm sorry, Hobbit and Balrog, where it says halfling and demon. Paul says, "Joke's on you, those are 10K pages are the original notes to Cinnabar." Well, my head explode. And hello, Paul. So just like Marvel has reprinted and made available the Origin of Spider-Man comic book so many times. You can get that in hardback, trade paperback, reprinted floppy. There's just no end of ways that that's available. It's not hard to get. The thing about an Amazing Mysteries, I can't, hang on a second. This has been bugging me. Amazing Fantasy number 15. Amazing Fantasy number 15. The Avengers number 1, Superman Action Comics number 1, Detective Comics where Batman first appears, the first appearance of Batman. All of those things are cultural icons. Any of us can know exactly what the Mona Lisa looks like. Photos so incredibly detailed that it looks like if you slid your hand down your computer monitor or down the page that you could feel the texture of paint. But the actual painting itself, or in this case the actual comic books or OD&D set themselves, they are icons of culture. When my friend purchases an OD&D set, I mean a wood grain OD&D set, or if you buy an Amazing Fantasy number 1 or an Action Comics number 1 or whatever, you're not buying it to take home to read, even carefully. Like, I'm going to wear a mask, I'm going to use gloves, I'm going to use padded forceps to turn each page. Maybe you might do that once, but it's not going to be like, I want to know what Superman's origin story is. I want to be gripped by those pages. Because there's 100 different ways you can find those things. I think you can probably read those comics for free online even. They are a part of culture, a physical anchor and representation of the past, and they are an investment. I do not begrudge people who wish to make those investments because nobody's ever going to reprint those box sets. There's never going to be, unless it's for the 50th anniversary of D&D or something, I don't foresee Wizards of the Coast saying, okay, here's 1,500 more identical copies of Wood Grain. We paid off the Tolkien estate so we can put hobbits and Balrogs back in the rules. Just like Marvel is not going to produce wood pulp paper and arsenic-based paint colors or dyes to make an Amazing Fantasy number 15 Spider-Man that is an identical copy. You are buying a representation of past art that will never be reproduced. Its preservation is as important as playing it. You can't not play original D&D. Any of you guys, if you want to go play original D&D right this second, you can open another browser tab and get the rules for original D&D and download them and print them, or have them printed on Lulu and get them delivered to your house. Nothing is going to stop you from doing that. You will always have access to them. Having a physical copy, you're saying I'm preserving a piece of the past. And that is the level of importance. And that's why I say that. And that's why that is a thing, why that's important. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. Let's see. Cerulean, now I just need a job to pay for them, but won't have time to paint. The cycle will never end. Yeah, I bought up a lot of my paints and miniatures when I had a job and I didn't have a lot of time to paint. Now I have the miniatures and the paints and not much of a job. So I have the time. You know, use your COVID check, but use your COOF money and buy yourself some paints and minis. Fortunately, it is fairly inexpensive to like I said, if you're buying the Nolzur's plastic minis, which is a great way to go, by the way. You can get fairly inexpensive minis. Paints, you know. So I hope that answers the question on original D&D boxes being valuable to people, because it's a part of history. You know, I jokingly sent my buddy that bit from Raiders of the Lost Ark where Indy thinks that Marion is dead, and Belloc sends somebody to fetch him, and he's, you know, says, look at he holds up a pocket watch and he says, it's worthless. $10 from a vendor in the street. But bury in the sand for 1,000 years and it becomes priceless. That's what the Ark is. Although, that's a little hiccup. $10 in 1935 or 36 when Raiders of the Lost Ark takes place. That watch, that's the equivalent of a couple $100. That's not worthless. I mean, unless Belloc is just a multi-millionaire dilettante. So, you know, who knows? So I'm about out of steam. Any more questions, guys? Any more at all? Because I gotta move on today. I got this evening after dinner. I gotta get out and cut the lawn and lots of other things. But I gotta buy some groceries too. So any more questions you guys have got, just ask. Paul wins today, by the way, with those 10K extra pages. Are the original notes to Cinnabar. I could believe it. That or the notes to Hybrid, the One Rule RPG. Woof. Talk about that with Kyle tomorrow night. While I'm waiting to see if you guys have any questions or further comments, I do want to remind you, just because I got to, this is what I do. Let me see. My channel. Still sitting at 657 subscribers. Looks like I lost one. That sucks. I'm sorry. Whoever decided to unsub, I apologize. I wish I could entice you back. But remember, 1,000 subscribers equals mini virtual con. I will run games for people that want to sign up and come to a mini virtual con. OD&D, AD&D, new stuff, Twilight 2000, Tales from the Loop. We'll play some Fight in the Skies. We hit 1,000 subs, and that is less than 350 subs away. So please, 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 talk to your friends, talk to your family. Say, hey, come over, click that like, click that subscribe, click the bell. All of that really helps. And we'll celebrate getting 1,000 subs by having a mini convention. I'll do that for you guys. So I'm going to go ahead then. What time will Kyle and I will probably start at 7:30 Eastern. And then we will see if Ishii is going to stream then. I'm going to find out from him. And we'll probably hop over on Ishii's stream too. That makes sense, although I find it funny because these things are from generations before me, and I'm curious to know what will happen to 5th as time goes on. No offense, but there's too much 5th edition out there. 5th won't matter until hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years have passed. And then it'll be just a museum piece of passing interest to scholars. That's like asking, like, well, what about Spider-Man issue number 204? What of it? As far as I know, there was nothing special in the first release of 5th edition. If they released 1,500 copies of the starter set that they hand put together at the office at Wizards of the Coast, it might be valuable. That's not to say that Wizards of the Coast hasn't done valuable things. They have. Early Magic the Gathering cards, for example. Very valuable. Got to post static videos with tags. I've seen creatives go full-time live streaming and their sub count stagnate. That may be it, Paul. That may be the thing to do. We'll see. We'll see. All right, guys. I really do have to go. I love you all. Thank you very much for being in the live stream today. Thank you to Shelby for popping over on Facebook. Good to see you, my dear. I will see everyone tomorrow evening. Kyle and I will be on. We're going to talk about Cinnabar, about Raven CS McCracken, and about hybrid and just whatever else insanity we can get into. So I wish you all the best.